Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we step into the deep woods of Appalachia, where trails disappear behind you, trees lean too close, and something walks where no one lives. These 8 stories are not passed down, they are left behind. In torn packs, in clawed bark, in the breath caught on half-buried microphones. They come from those who came back wrong, and those who never left a footprint. If stories like these keep you listening, subscribe, leave a comment, and tell us where you're watching from. Now dim the lights, zip the tent, and listen close. The morning mist draped itself over the mountain like a wet shroud. Every step I took sent soft puffs of earth and dead leaves into the air as I packed up my tent. Water beaded on the fly sheet and dropped steadily onto the pine needles below. My name's Kara. I was 27 back then, and I'd come to the high Appalachian ridge with a quiet purpose: finish my healing journal. After my mother passed, this trip was supposed to be part closure, part pilgrimage. A slow, solo walk through the land she loved. The trail I followed wasn't on any formal map, just old logging paths and deer tracks that twisted between overgrown orchards and forgotten fences. I'd been through this forest twice before during college fieldwork. It wasn't entirely unfamiliar. The persimmon trees still clung to the last of their orange fruit, and the streams curved like veins across the slope, clear and cold. But that first morning, as I tucked the sleeping bag into its strap, I heard something odd, like a voice drifting from the far side of the ridge, too faint to catch the words. But it wasn't the wind. It came in pulses, echoing, like someone whispering into a hollow log. I paused, waited. It didn't come again. Still, the air felt different, charged, like the forest was holding its breath. That night, the stillness stretched long. I remember laying in the tent, zipped in tight, eyes closed. Just as I began to drift off, the leaves above me began to rattle, soft and precise. But the air was dead still. Not a breeze anywhere. Every time I stirred, half awake, that whispering echo returned. Closer, clearer. Not quite inside my head. Not quite outside. Just below the surface. Come out. Follow me. I told myself I was dreaming. That maybe it was a trick of the wind and sleep deprivation. But the next morning, when I unrolled the old map tucked into my notebook, something didn't add up. A new red line had appeared, faint, shaky, almost like it was drawn in charcoal. It trailed off from the marked trail and cut deep into the forest, veering north toward a thicket I hadn't noticed before. I didn't remember drawing it. I followed it, half out of curiosity, half because I didn't want to sit in camp replaying the night before. As I walked, the trees began to look different. The trunks bore shallow carvings, almost like spirals or nested ovals. Not random graffiti, something older. The further I went, the more out of place things seemed. Vines hung like twisted ropes from the branches, coiling and thin, almost like they'd been placed. I reached out to touch one, and it swayed slightly, even though nothing moved the air. And that feeling of being watched, like someone was moving just behind my field of vision, never left. At one point, I turned fast, convinced I'd caught movement. All I saw was green, a sliver of shape that vanished too easily into the woods. By the third night, my nerves were thin. I kept the flashlight beside me, gripped tight around the handle. I lay there, staring at the dark seam of the tent ceiling. Every rustle outside turned sharp. Every shift in the shadows made my breath catch. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, careful, pressing into the soft earth just beyond the nylon walls. I held my breath. The flap at the foot of the tent stirred. Not the zipper, just the mesh netting shifting like someone's finger was tracing the edge. The fabric pushed inward. A hand, long, pale green, pressed flat against the mesh. No shadow behind it, no figure outside, just the hand. And then, stillness. I launched upright, grabbed the flashlight, and my bag without checking what I left behind. My boots barely laced. I stumbled out into the dark. The mist had thickened into a wall. Every breath felt like drinking cold milk. My ears rang from the silence that pressed in on every side. I did not look back. I couldn't. The beam from my flashlight cut through the fog like a blade, but it only reached a few feet ahead. I moved fast, heart hammering. The forest felt different, like the ground had tilted beneath me and I had stepped off the edge of a map. The echo came again, louder now. Do not leave. I stopped just long enough to scan behind a tree, then kept walking. Fast. My legs burned. My breath caught sharp in my throat. I clutched the handle of the knife in my jacket pocket, the plastic worn smooth from weeks of carrying it. At some point, maybe an hour in, the trees began to thin. I broke through a line of scrub into an open clearing. Grass up to my knees, low shrubs, and the sky above, pale with the promise of morning. I dropped my bag and stood there, just breathing. The silence here felt different. Not heavy, just empty. I told myself I had made it out, that the ridge was behind me, that whatever had followed me could not cross open ground. I let myself believe that. But the forest never really lets go. I kept walking, slower now, moving toward what looked like a lower slope on the far end. My legs ached. My face was damp with sweat and mist. Just a little farther, I thought. A few more steps. Then the tree line folded in again. The mist crept back, and the trail vanished beneath my feet. 1 second, I was walking a faint path. The next, it was gone. The underbrush rose like a trap around my legs. I turned. Nothing but thick woods behind me. I hadn't changed direction, but somehow I was back inside. Then the sound returned. Louder. Closer. Steps. Running. I break into a sprint. Branches whip across my arms. Something crashes through the brush behind me, too heavy to be wind. I veer left, duck between two trees. My boot catches on a root. I stumble, catch myself on one hand, knife still clutched in the other. A shape flashes past my right, tall, thin, too fast. I can feel it watching. I bolt again, through vines that catch at my sleeves. One snaps back and slashes my cheek. I do not stop. I swing the flashlight wildly, the beam bouncing off wet bark. The whisper is no longer a whisper. With me. Come with me. A figure drops from a low limb, just ahead. I see only the outline before I turn hard, almost fall. My bag tears on a branch. I duck again, push through brambles. Something grabs at the back of my jacket. I twist. The knife scrapes something hard. The pressure vanishes. I do not look back. I just run. Eventually, somehow, I find the stream again. My boots sink into the bank as I half fall into the water. It is freezing. It shocks my mind clear. The world is bright again. The fog starts to lift. By the time I make it to the ranger road, I am limping and soaked. My bag is gone. My journal, too. I never told anyone the full story. I wrote what I could remember in a new notebook, but it never felt complete. Some nights, I still hear the echo, a voice at the edge of sleep. Come with me. I have not gone back. I cannot hike anymore without getting turned around. Trails twist when I am not looking. Directions feel wrong, like something behind my eyes wants me to veer left when the map says right. I think that ridge never really let me leave. Not all the way. I'm Darren, 34. The morning I arrived in Dry Hollow Valley to assess a decaying footbridge, I found a small birdcage sitting dead center on the span. It hadn't been in any of the last survey photos, and no locals mentioned it when I asked about the site. The bridge itself was barely standing. Old locust wood slats, some split clean through, slick with moss and long-dried mud. The whole thing crossed a narrow gully that hadn't held water in years, just stone and weeds in the trench below. I'd planned to take photos and draft a structural report before noon. Inside the cage, there were no birds, just dry leaves and a few white feathers. They weren't molted, too soft. No blood, no bones, like something had been gently plucked away and left behind. I crouched down to take a photo. The frame clicked. When I looked at the screen, a faint black blur appeared behind me, just past the far railing, like someone standing back from the bridge. But when I turned around, there was nothing, just mist curling above the gully and the sound of a crow in the trees. I stayed still, waited. The wind pressed low across the grass, but nothing moved. No footsteps, no voices. Still, I took the rest of the pictures quickly, every few glances, checking over my shoulder. That afternoon I worked from my truck, parked just up the hill. I made notes, transferred the images, even zoomed in on the blur in a few of the shots. It didn't have a clear shape. It looked more like a heavy shadow, where there should not have been one. That night, I stayed in the cab, heater running low. I'd done this before on other field jobs, so it didn't feel strange. But somewhere around 2 in the morning, I woke up, not from a noise, just that creeping sense that something outside had changed. I looked out the windshield. Fog, trees, nothing unusual. Then I looked toward the bridge. There was a shape hanging from beneath the beams, a shadow swinging slowly. The birdcage. It wasn't there before. I was sure of it. I had checked when I parked, but now it hung from a bent nail, twisting like it was caught in a soft breeze. No sound, no creak, just movement. I stayed locked in the truck, eyes on that swinging cage until I must have fallen asleep again, too tired to stay alert. The sound of cracking wood woke me, sharp, clean. I sit up fast, grab the flashlight, and swing the beam toward the bridge. A plank splits in the center. Dust lifts into the air. The cage drops, vanishes through the break. I get out of the truck, walk closer, slow. My boots scrape against gravel. I shine the light through the broken span and see something shift at the bottom of the dry ravine. A black shape, rocking side to side. It does not look up, but I know it sees me. I took 3 steps back, then turned and walked toward the tree line. Not fast, not loud, just steady. The way you move when you feel something watching, but you do not want to provoke it. My flashlight barely cut through the low mist, but I kept close to the edge of the woods, looking for another way down the ridge, without touching that bridge again. The trees closed in quicker than I expected. What looked like a thin stretch of forest from the road was dense and tangled once I stepped inside. The underbrush caught at my boots. Vines hung low across the path like they were trying to pull me down. I tried to push through anyway, following a slope that curved away from the gully. But the land dropped too fast. My foot slipped on a patch of damp moss, and I fell hard onto one knee. I cursed and kept going, hands gripping roots and trunks to climb my way around. At one point, I turned and tried to find my truck through the trees. Nothing. Just bark and shadow. No path. No road. Like the woods had shifted while I was moving. Eventually, I saw light. Not real light. Just space. An opening at the top of a short rise. I climbed toward it, lungs burning. From the ridge, I spotted it through the trees, a roofline, faded tin, slanted to one side. A hunting cabin, maybe. It looked empty, but real, solid. I moved toward it like it was a lifeline. The path up was lined with old boards and broken fencing. I kept my light steady on the doorway, half expecting it to shut on its own. When I reached it, I paused and knocked once. No answer. The door creaked open when I pushed. Inside, the air was thick with dust. No signs of use. No warmth. Just a single room with a table and a cot, both covered in mold-speckled cloth. The air felt heavier the longer I stood there. I shut the door behind me, not because I felt safe, but because whatever was outside felt worse. The floor groaned beneath my boots. I crossed the room slow, flashlight low. My hand brushed the cot's frame and sent a wave of dust into the air. I turned toward the far wall. There was a hatch in the floor. Before I could step closer, the boards beneath me gave out. They do not splinter. They collapse. I fall straight through. My flashlight spins, hits the ground with a crack. The air is black, cold, wet. I land hard, roll to my side. My elbow slams into dirt. I push myself up, every muscle shaking. Something breathes. Loud, slow, damp. I freeze. My eyes adjust just enough to make out the walls. Stone. Cracked. A root snakes through one. The breathing gets closer. A hand brushes my shoulder. Thin. Bony. I scream and throw myself sideways, back into the wall. The thing shifts toward me. I scramble, fingers clawing at the rock. My boot slips, but I find a crack. Pull myself through a narrow gap just wide enough to squeeze my chest. The hand grabs at my coat, but I twist free. I do not stop until I see daylight. I do not stop to breathe. When I finally reach the road, I do not look back. I do not speak. I just get in the truck and drive. But I saw it. When I passed the old cabin one last time, something hung from the roof beam. The bird cage, still swinging. Back home, I could not sleep. Every morning, around 5, I would wake up with my heart pounding. And in the corner of the room, just where the shadows touched the wall, I would see it. 2 pale eyes, wide, unblinking, and always watching. The wind moved through the stone gaps like a whistle, but underneath it, I heard something else. A slow, deliberate tapping that echoed from the black hill ahead, like metal against stone. Even impatient, I'm Lydia, 30 years old, a geologist sent to assess the stability of the old coal seams just west of Black Hollow Ridge. My Jeep rattled along the gravel path, dust thick enough to coat the windshield in gray by the time I reached the base of the old site. The hill had been stripped decades ago. Nothing left but soft shale, loose rock, and the entrance to a collapsed mine. Most of the records were lost in an office fire. That was why they sent someone out, to mark fault lines and confirm if the site could be repurposed for groundwater work. I parked near what used to be the foreman's trailer. It leaned like a drunk, half swallowed by weeds. As I stepped out, the crunch of coal dust under my boots sounded too loud in the stillness. The air smelled burnt, though nothing smoldered. With the sun dropping behind the ridge, I moved fast, took a few surface samples, measured seam depth, then snapped a photo of the mine's sealed mouth, just to document the location. That was when I saw it. In the viewfinder, just above the shaft entrance, a faint figure stood against the soot-black rocks. Thin, too still. By the time I lowered the camera and looked again, the spot was empty. I scanned the area, called out once. No echo, no response. The wind picked up and kicked grit into my mouth. I told myself it was a smudge on the lens. I spent the night in the Jeep, as planned. Engine off, windows cracked. The world outside was silent, until just past 2 in the morning. A knock. Not on the window. From above. Right on the roof. Metal tapping. 3 beats. Pause. Then again. I sat up fast, holding my breath. The roof creaked with weight that should not have been there. My hand went to the flashlight. I clicked it on and aimed it upward through the windshield. Nothing. Silence returned. I did not sleep again. At sunrise, I went looking for the secondary tunnel, the one mentioned in the last surviving survey from the 1,970 seconds. Most of it was collapsed, but enough remained to crawl through. The entrance was low and blocked with debris. I cleared it slowly, then stepped inside. The floor crunched underfoot, the way broken glass does in old houses. It was not stone. It was compacted coal, and scattered across it were fresh footprints. Not boot prints, bare feet, small. I raised my flashlight and followed the path. The tunnel dipped and twisted. Long dead lamps hung from wires above, rusted and cold. The deeper I went, the louder the sound became. That tapping again. Faint, steady, somewhere up ahead. I turned a corner and froze. There, at the end of the tunnel, a figure crouched low, shoulders rising and falling with a sound like rasping breath. It turned its head, slowly, eyes pale white, blinking fast. Then it stood and backed into the dark. I turned and ran. My boots slipped on the coal dust, the beam from my flashlight bouncing wildly along the tunnel walls. I did not stop until I reached the side shaft, the one marked on the survey as an emergency exit. I grabbed the ladder and pulled myself up fast, hands scraping on rusted metal. The hatch at the top was jammed. I shoved it hard with my shoulder, but it held. Dust trickled down from the ceiling. Behind me, the tunnel stayed silent. That was worse than sound. Then the tapping started again. Not ahead, not behind. Everywhere. It echoed through the stone like the mine itself was knocking. I stopped moving, held my breath. It grew louder, like it was under my feet now, crawling through the rock. I scrambled back down the ladder and ducked into a narrow side room. A maintenance alcove, maybe. Inside was a small utility vehicle, one of those squat carts used for hauling gear. Its door creaked but opened. I climbed inside, locked the latch, and killed the light. Just the low hum of the old system still working somewhere deep in the bones of the mine. I sat there in the dark, waiting. The tapping faded. Then it stopped. I waited longer. 5 minutes. 10. My heartbeat slowed. The air felt calmer. Like maybe whatever it was had gone. I turned the light back on. Still nothing. For the first time that day, I let myself believe I might be safe. I opened the cart door. A hand slams against the glass. A face rises, inches from mine, eyes wide, white, staring. It does not scream. It just watches. Then it drops. I slam the door shut and fumble for the ignition. The engine stutters, then roars to life. I shift forward, the tires spinning slightly before catching. I drive fast. The tunnel curves sharply. Walls tight. I do not care. The tapping returns. Not behind. Beside. Then below. I reach a junction and turn hard. The wheels skid. The car tips slightly, then rights itself. A deep pit opens just ahead. Edges loose with ash and shale. I veer left at the last second. The cart slams into the wall and keeps going. Behind me, the ground gives way. If I had hesitated, I would have gone down with it. I break through the final gate, metal bars swinging open just enough to pass. I do not look back. Later, in my report, I wrote unusual stratigraphic instability observed near old shaft. That was all, but I knew what I saw. What followed? I never returned to that site, not even to confirm the collapse. And to this day, every time I hear tapping, on pipes, on railings, on the roof when it rains, I freeze. Because I remember. And I know it remembers too. We hiked up the slope of Bluff Hollow just after noon. The trail was damp and narrow, running along a low stream that murmured under fallen branches. Mara walked behind me, close enough that I could hear her breathing. But every time I glanced back, her eyes slid away from mine, wide and unfocused, like she was watching something that wasn't there. We set up camp near a shallow creek where the soil was loose, but the rocks formed a natural ledge. Rain drifted in from the west, soft at first, turning the leaves slick and heavy. Mara unpacked her bag without a word, fingers trembling slightly. My name is Rex, 29. I was out here on assignment with a volunteer program to plant trees and stabilize eroded banks. Mara had joined me at the last minute, saying she wanted a break from the city. We had always worked well together, but she was different now, quieter, her movements delayed, like a sleepwalker. That first night, the rain thickened until it became a curtain outside the tent. I woke to the sound of the zipper rasping open. Mara was gone. Her bag lay unzipped and spilling onto the ground sheet, her boots missing. I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the dark. The forest smelled wet and mineral, like old stone. My flashlight caught only tree trunks and rain. I called her name twice, then louder. No answer, just the sound of water moving through roots. When I returned to camp, she was sitting on the ground near the tent. Her hair was plastered to her face. She stared at the tree line, eyes red, lips moving but making no sound. When I reached for her shoulder, she pressed a finger against my mouth as if to hush me. The next morning she walked ahead of me, staring into the woods. She didn't look back when I spoke. We were meant to gather seedlings along the lower slope, but the area around the camp looked wrong. The bark of several trees was scarred with strange carvings, not letters but curling shapes that reminded me of footprints bent in on themselves. One of the stumps near our tent bore an imprint like a human palm pressed into its center. The soil around it was damp and ridged, as if something had crawled instead of walked. I tried to laugh it off, but Mara only traced the carvings with her fingertips. By the second night, the rain had not let up. The air inside the tent was thick and cold. I woke again to a change in sound, the hiss of water, the soft hush of someone outside. I unzipped the flap an inch and saw her. Mara stood just beyond the edge of the light, her back to me. Rain poured down her hair and shoulders. One arm lifted, hand open, reaching out as if inviting me to follow. I lunged forward, grabbed her by the wrist, and pulled her back inside the tent. She stumbled and stared at me with eyes that did not look like Mara's anymore. I asked her what she was doing out there, but she only shook her head and hissed the words, "Follow me," through her teeth. The rain hammered on the nylon, making the space feel small and heavy. I decided we had to leave. Whatever was happening, the forest felt wrong. I stuffed our gear into my pack, tried to get Mara moving toward the trailhead, but she dug her heels into the mud, pulling against me, whispering something I could not catch. The rain made the ground slick as clay. My boots slid, and Mara's hair whipped across her face as she struggled. We moved like that for a long time, the forest dark and close, until a shape loomed ahead. A shack, low roof, rusted tin sheets, no windows. Inside, the air was dry compared to the rain outside. Old ashes in a pit suggested someone had lit a fire long ago. The walls creaked in the wind, but at least it was shelter. I sat Mara down on the floorboards, hoping the stillness would calm her. For a moment, it felt like it might. I leaned against the wall. I closed my eyes and listened. The rain dulled to a hush. The only sound was our breathing. I almost let myself drift. Then I felt it. A breath, slow and heavy against the side of my neck. I turned my head fast. No one there. Mara sat motionless, her chest rising and falling as if she were asleep. The breath came again, closer, but there was nothing to see. My skin crawled. Something cold slid across my collarbone, a touch so light it could have been a strand of wet hair. I reached out, but my hand met empty air. Mara's eyes opened slowly, and she began to slide away from me on her hands and knees as if pulled by something I could not see. A thin shadow flickered past the window, gone before I could focus on it. I grabbed Mara's arm and yanked her back, heart hammering. She felt lighter than she should have, like a coat without a body inside. I turned, scanning the doorway, ready to run if anything came through. If I had moved slower, she would have slipped out of my grip completely. We left the shack before dawn. The rain had stopped, but the ground still smelled of iron and moss. I walked ahead, and Mara followed in silence, her face unreadable in the weak light. Back in the city, she vanished 2 days later. No calls, no trace. Only the shirt she had worn still hangs in my closet, faintly damp no matter how many times I dry it. Sometimes, at night, I see the shape of that shirt drift past my doorway, moving on its own, just like she did. I'm Ian, 33. I was sent to Raven's Hollow to repair a damaged wind station, an old mountaintop site that hadn't been touched in years. The trail up was half erased by brush, and the only sound for miles was wind dragging through dry grass. The station stood crooked against the sky, its frame rusted and cable slack. Anemometers spun unevenly in the gusts, and the tower creaked like something straining under its own age. I pitched my tent near the base, close enough to monitor the equipment. By nightfall, the ridge disappeared behind a wall of mist. Just after midnight, the radio buzzed to life. Static at first, then something stranger, a faint voice, threading through the interference like it did not belong to any signal I had programmed. The wind. Leads? I stared at the receiver, waited for more. It went silent again. I told myself it was just a garbled echo, maybe bleed from an old weather broadcast. But the next morning, the instruments acted wrong. The main vane spun slowly at first, then reversed direction, jerking back and forth like something was fighting it. I checked the wiring. Everything was intact. The readout needle on the gauge pulsed hard, then froze mid-swing. I stepped outside the tent. The wind stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Complete stillness dropped over the ridge like a blanket. My ears rang in the silence. The absence of movement was so sudden that I felt like I had gone deaf. Then it came back all at once. A violent gust slammed into the station, causing the frame to rattle. The gauge needle shot into the red. I rushed toward the controls but froze halfway there. The vane snapped. The metal arm broke clean off and spun into the grass with a shriek. I backed away, eyes on the tower. Something stood on the observation deck, tall, thin, its shape barely visible through the low cloud. It did not move, just watched. I raised the binoculars with both hands. Steady, focused. The figure dissolved into the fog like it had never been there at all. I packed what I could and started down the slope. My bag bounced against my spine with every step, tools clinking inside. The wind picked up again, harder this time, pushing sideways against my body like it wanted to steer me off course. I leaned forward and braced, but each gust grew stronger, making it hard to stay upright. The trail was gone, somewhere in the mist. I had veered too far. When I turned back, the station had vanished behind a wall of white. The wind tower, once a marker above the trees, was swallowed whole by fog. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other. The ridge dipped, then rose again, and my legs burned from the incline. I checked the compass. It spun once, then stopped without pointing to anything I recognized. Then, through the haze, a light, faint and yellow, barely above the line of rocks ahead. I moved toward it, thinking it could be an old ranger post or a control shed. Anything with shelter, anything with a roof. It looked like a small outpost, metal frame, half collapsed, but standing. I stepped close, heart thudding. The light blinked, flickered once, then went out. A smell hit me, burned wire and ozone, like something had shorted out just seconds ago. I stood there for a beat, listening. Nothing but wind. Then it shifted again. The wind turns fast and hot, swirling around me. It shoves me from behind, then pulls sideways like hands pressed to my ribs. I run. The ground turns uneven. Iron posts jut from the soil like ribs. I dodge between them, lungs burning. Behind me, footsteps. Too fast. Too close. I look back once. A figure. Arms reaching. Face hidden. Moving faster than wind should carry anything. I veer left. Duck under a twisted beam. A branch catches my arm and tears through my sleeve. The sound of breathing behind me grows louder. I see the edge of a sinkhole just ahead. My foot slips. I grab for a steel cable still strung between two posts. If I had missed it, I would have gone in. The figure stops short of the edge. Its face just out of reach. Then it vanishes into the gale. I made it back at sunrise. Dirt streaked. Half frozen. Mouth dry as ash. They asked about the tower. I gave them data and silence. Back in the city, I started reacting to wind. Not like before. Now it made me tremble. Cold sweat. Vision blurring. And every night, when the breeze slips through my window screen, I hear it again. The faint scrape of wire. The whisper of something still waiting at the top of that ridge. I found the photograph near the split in the ridge trail, just past where the pines crowd in too tight. The wind had blown it against the base of a rock, its corners soft with age, edges curled from damp. Someone had taken it long ago. It showed a man standing stiff in front of a cabin deep in the woods, his face scratched out with something sharp and deliberate. Behind him, the cabin slouched beneath a dense canopy, its roof mossy, porch half sunken into the brush. Faint sunlight barely touched the clearing, but you could make out a sign nailed to the post. That was the first time I noticed it. The same sign I had seen weeks earlier on a tattered survey map labeled Sierra Ridge. My name is Emery. I was 31 then. A photographer by trade, more or less. I'd been traveling through old mining routes looking for forgotten structures, places that hadn't been touched in decades, where the stories felt half sunk into the ground. But this photo didn't come from my collection, or from any archive I knew. The man's boots left a faint track in the foreground, angled just slightly toward the photographer, and I saw something chilling in that small detail. His pose wasn't casual. It was confrontational. Whoever stood behind the camera that day hadn't been just another hiker. This felt personal. You ever find something that feels like it wasn't meant to be found? Like it slipped through by accident? The cabin looked like the one marked 10 miles west of my camp. I checked the grid on my old paper map again. Sierra Ridge, near the broken tree line. That afternoon, I packed light and left early, heading toward where the trail turned from gravel to moss. The path narrowed fast. Old switchbacks crumbled beneath my boots, and the underbrush swallowed the lower trail markers. It didn't feel like a trail anymore, more like a guess that people kept making. A few miles in, I saw the first set of footprints. They were wet, still soft, pressed into a stretch of mud that hadn't dried from last night's storm. I knelt to look closer. The tread matched the ones in the photo. Same circular wear near the heel. I thought maybe someone else was out here following the same lead. But something about the way those steps drifted off the main path felt off. They cut toward the west slope, through bramble and low oak. Eventually, I found the cabin. It slumped behind a split rail fence, half-eaten by vines, its windows gaping. Every instinct told me not to step closer, but I had come this far. I crossed the porch slowly, camera bag tight to my side. Inside, the air was thick with rot. The floor groaned with every step. Rusted tools hung on nails, their shapes blurred by dust. A small ladder led to a crawl space above the back room, and though every bit of me screamed no, I climbed. The attic space was barely high enough to crouch. My flashlight beam caught something glittering on the far end, a broken mirror. Only one shard remained in the frame. I leaned closer. The shard caught my reflection in something else, a figure behind me. Still, watching. I turned fast. Nothing. Just the dark and the thrum of my pulse in my ears. But when I looked back into the shard again, it was blank. My reflection and nothing more. Downstairs, the front wall had deep scratches in the wood. I hadn't noticed them on the way in. They weren't claw marks, more like symbols. Short, horizontal lines, layered like tally marks. I reached for my camera, lifted it toward the wall. Just before I pressed the shutter, something pressed over the lens. A hand. Dry, cold, heavy. It pushed the camera down, closing the lens cap with 2 fingers. Then it withdrew, quietly, deliberately. I stumbled back, heart jamming in my throat, staring into the space where no one should have been. I backed out of the cabin fast, nearly dropping the camera. My mind raced to make sense of what I had just seen, or thought I had seen. The air outside felt no better than the attic, heavier, like it held something that didn't want me there. Thunder cracked above the trees, and a fine drizzle started threading through the leaves. I didn't wait. I followed my own footprints back down the trail, trying not to look over my shoulder. But the rain came harder, faster than I expected. The trail turned slick and treacherous, roots shining like wet bones. My flashlight blinked. Once, then again. I smacked it against my palm. It steadied, but the shadows stretched longer now, and everything sounded closer. The wind, the water, my own steps. Then I saw it. A cabin I hadn't noticed on the way up, tucked low in a hollow to my right. A small lodge or maybe an old ranger post. The door was ajar. I ran toward it. No hesitation. The door creaked open as I pushed it, and I slipped inside just as the rain broke into a downpour. I shut the door behind me and held still, listening. Nothing but the patter of rain on the roof and the hum of some old electric light inside. The room smelled dry, warmer than outside. Dusty furniture lined the walls. A cot, a wooden chest, shelves with empty glass jars. Someone had lived here once, maybe long ago. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Finally, some place to wait out the storm. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, and took out the photograph again, just to be sure. The cabin in the image, the one from earlier. This place was not the same. That much I was certain of. But the markings on the photo, those faint, carved lines near the corner, they looked more familiar now. I had seen them inside the first cabin. They were real. Then the light dimmed, just slightly. I turned toward the window. A shape stood outside. Its shadow stretched long across the pane. Not moving, just watching. I froze. Every sound in the world dropped away. Slowly, I crawled toward the edge of a tall wooden cabinet in the corner and slipped behind it, tucking myself into the narrow space where the wall met the frame. The door creaks. One soft groan, then nothing. Rain keeps falling. The silence inside feels tighter now, like something holding its breath. Bare feet on wood. Careful, deliberate, closer. I don't breathe. I don't move. Then it comes. Just beside the cabinet, a sound like fabric brushing the edge of the wood. Something exhales near my ear, slow and long, like it's smelling me. I tilt my head just enough to see through the gap in the boards. A face, blurred like a reflection on water, pale, smiling, but not with joy. With patience, I clamp my eyes shut. I don't move. The breathing stops. The silence stretches. Then, footsteps, moving away, out the door. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours. The rain had long stopped when I finally slipped outside, careful not to look back. Back in the city, I kept the photograph. I should have burned it, but I couldn't. It's in a drawer now, wrapped in cloth, tucked under books I never open. But I swear, each time I pull it out, the face, the one that used to be scratched, it's less obscured, like it's healing, coming back, And now, the man in the picture looks almost familiar. I don't take photos in the woods anymore. Can't. Not since that day. But sometimes, when I'm alone and the light changes in my apartment, I feel it again. That slow breath near my ear. That waiting patience. And I wonder how many photos I've taken over the years, and what might have been standing behind me. Every night, at exactly 2:22, I woke to the sound of dripping water. Always the same rhythm. A single drop, then a pause, then another. It came from just beneath the window, like something was slowly hollowing out the earth outside the wall. The first night, I thought it was runoff from the stream nearby. But by the third night, it no longer felt like coincidence. The sound never changed. Not louder, not faster, just patient, predictable. My name is Isabel. I was 28 then, a freelance writer working on a piece about seasonal changes in mountain streams. I had taken up a month-long stay in an old cabin above what locals called the Old Creek, a sluggish, winding flow that came alive each spring. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow dirt path, tucked against a slope that dipped sharply into the ravine. Out front was a stone step, slick with moss. Out back, the creek cut close to the foundation, sometimes brushing up against the wooden beams during heavy rains. That was part of why I chose it. Proximity to the source. The first 2 weeks were calm, cold mornings, quiet nights. I wrote. I hiked. I took measurements of the stream and watched the water shift from clear to silt-heavy as the storms began rolling in from the west. Then the weather turned. Rain came steady for 3 days. Not hard, but insistent. The ground around the cabin grew soft. I could hear the creek rise at night, the sound of water pulling at the stones, the occasional crack of shifting branches. One night, I stood at the back window and watched the current pull a fallen log under in seconds. By the 5th night of rain, I noticed something else. The drip I heard each night, it had moved. Not outside anymore. Inside, still under the window, but now hitting wood. I went to check. Under the window frame, a dark stain had begun to bloom across the floor. When I pressed my palm to the boards, they felt cold and damp. I followed the wall down to the crawlspace hatch and lifted it. The air underneath smelled metallic and sour. That evening, thunder rolled in across the ridge, and the rain fell harder. I sat with my laptop on the kitchen table, listening to it batter the roof like fists. Then came a sound I hadn't heard before. A knocking from above. Not sharp, but slow and dull. Like something was tapping the shingles in a steady, resigned rhythm. I climbed to the attic and found nothing. Just old boxes and a single beam that dripped slowly into a rusted tin pan. But as I turned to go back down, a low vibration passed through the walls. A hum. A shift. The kind of movement that doesn't make a sound, but makes your bones feel heavier. Later that night, I checked the bedroom floor again and saw a thin line of water pushing through the baseboard. It crept in like smoke, quiet and steady. I moved my bags onto the bed and threw down towels. Useless. I sat by the window, flashlight in hand. The rain blurred the glass, but the creek was visible in flashes of lightning. Then I saw it. A figure in the water, just beyond the edge of the stream, standing. The water reached its thighs, current tugging at its legs. It swayed with the motion, neither resisting nor moving forward. I leaned closer. The figure remained. No umbrella, no coat, no sign of why it would be out there in that flood. Then it dipped forward slightly, as if bending at the waist. And the water kept rising. I didn't sleep after that. I spent the next hour hauling what I could onto the kitchen counter. Laptop, notebooks, backup drives, flashlight, 2 bottles of water. By then, the floor was slick, water creeping toward the hallway. I wrapped electronics in plastic bags and shoved them into my pack. I tried the back door, thinking I could maybe reach the ridge trail, but it barely budged. The water pressure outside held it shut like a seal. I jammed my shoulder into it once, twice, but it was no use. The current had pinned the cabin in place. I had no choice but to go up. I pulled the attic ladder down and climbed onto the roof. The rain was colder than I expected. Sharp. It slapped against my skin and soaked through my coat in minutes. I crawled across the shingles and settled near the center beam, where the slope gave me a small dip to sit in. From there, I watched the water rise. Trees shifted below like shadows bending in a dream. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked and snapped. For a moment, the wind stopped. The rain thinned. The whole forest went still. It gave me hope. I move. I slide down the edge of the roof, boots slipping on the slick shingles. I jump, land hard in the shallow slope behind the cabin. The water is waist-deep and biting cold. I push toward the nearest tree line, aiming for the higher ground just beyond the ridge. But then, the wind howls again. A gust hits me sideways. I lose my footing, slam down. The current grabs my legs. I'm in, fully, spinning. I reach for anything. My hand finds a root, a thick one jutting from the bank. I latch on. My body swings with the current, slammed against the trunk. I can't climb. I can't pull up. Water keeps shoving me sideways, dragging me toward the edge of the ravine. A rock tears at my shoulder. My legs scrape against something sharp. I scream, but the water eats it, all of it. Then I feel it. Something shifts beneath me. The base of the tree trembles. If I lose this grip, I'm gone. I hold. I don't know how long. Long enough for the wind to die again. Long enough for the water to slow just enough. When they found me at dawn, I was curled at the base of that same tree, covered in mud and shaking. A rescue crew in yellow vests pulled me up and carried me out without a word. They had to cut their way through the trees to reach the cabin. The front porch was gone. The window frames cracked inward, like something had tried to crawl through. Inside, the bedroom floor had collapsed. But what I still see most clearly, what never leaves me, are the footprints. Wet, bare, leading up the wall beneath the window, as if someone had stepped from the flood and climbed upward with no weight at all. Back in the city now, I flinch every time a storm rolls in. My hands tremble without warning. And sometimes, just before sleep, I hear it again. Drip, pause, drip. Always, from just beneath the window. Every night, at exactly 2:22, I woke to the sound of dripping water. Always the same rhythm. A single drop, then a pause, then another. It came from just beneath the window, like something was slowly hollowing out the earth outside the wall. The first night, I thought it was runoff from the stream nearby, but by the third night, it no longer felt like coincidence. The sound never changed. Not louder, not faster, just patient, predictable. My name is Isabel. I was 28 then, a freelance writer working on a piece about seasonal changes in mountain streams. I had taken up a month-long stay in an old cabin above what locals called the Old Creek, a sluggish, winding flow that came alive each spring. The cabin sat at the end of a narrow dirt path, tucked against a slope that dipped sharply into the ravine. Out front was a stone step, slick with moss. Out back, the creek cut close to the foundation, sometimes brushing up against the wooden beams during heavy rains. That was part of why I chose it. Proximity to the source. The first 2 weeks were calm. Cold mornings. Quiet nights. I wrote. I hiked. I took measurements of the stream and watched the water shift from clear to silt heavy as the storms began rolling in from the west. Then the weather turned. Rain came steady for 3 days. Not hard, but insistent. The ground around the cabin grew soft. I could hear the creek rise at night, the sound of water pulling at the stones, the occasional crack of shifting branches. One night, I stood at the back window and watched the current pull a fallen log under in seconds. By the fifth night of rain, I noticed something else. The drip I heard each night, it had moved. Not outside anymore. Inside, still under the window, but now hitting wood. I went to check. Under the window frame, a dark stain had begun to bloom across the floor. When I pressed my palm to the boards, they felt cold and damp. I followed the wall down to the crawlspace hatch and lifted it. The air underneath smelled metallic and sour. That evening, thunder rolled in across the ridge, and the rain fell harder. I sat with my laptop on the kitchen table, listening to it batter the roof like fists. Then came a sound I hadn't heard before. A knocking from above. Not sharp, but slow and dull. Like something was tapping the shingles in a steady, resigned rhythm. I climbed to the attic and found nothing. Just old boxes and a single beam that dripped slowly into a rusted tin pan. But as I turned to go back down, a low vibration passed through the walls. A hum. A shift. The kind of movement that doesn't make a sound, but makes your bones feel heavier. Later that night, I checked the bedroom floor again and saw a thin line of water pushing through the baseboard. It crept in like smoke, quiet and steady. I moved my bags onto the bed and threw down towels. Useless. I sat by the window, flashlight in hand. The rain blurred the glass, but the creek was visible in flashes of lightning. Then I saw it. A figure in the water, just beyond the edge of the stream, standing. The water reached its thighs, current tugging at its legs. It swayed with the motion, neither resisting nor moving forward. I leaned closer. The figure remained. No umbrella, no coat, no sign of why it would be out there in that flood. Then it dipped forward slightly, as if bending at the waist, and the water kept rising. I didn't sleep after that. I spent the next hour hauling what I could onto the kitchen counter. Laptop, notebooks, backup drives, flashlight, 2 bottles of water. By then, the floor was slick, water creeping toward the hallway. I wrapped electronics in plastic bags and shoved them into my pack. I tried the back door, thinking I could maybe reach the ridge trail, but it barely budged. The water pressure outside held it shut like a seal. I jammed my shoulder into it once, twice, but it was no use. The current had pinned the cabin in place. I had no choice but to go up. I pulled the attic ladder down and climbed onto the roof. The rain was colder than I expected. Sharp. It slapped against my skin and soaked through my coat in minutes. I crawled across the shingles and settled near the center beam, where the slope gave me a small dip to sit in. From there, I watched the water rise. Trees shifted below like shadows bending in a dream. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked and snapped. For a moment, the wind stopped. The rain thinned. The whole forest went still. It gave me hope. I move. I slide down the edge of the roof, boots slipping on the slick shingles. I jump, land hard in the shallow slope behind the cabin. The water is waist-deep and biting cold. I push toward the nearest tree line, aiming for the higher ground just beyond the ridge. But then, the wind howls again. A gust hits me sideways. I lose my footing, slam down. The current grabs my legs. I'm in, fully, spinning. I reach for anything. My hand finds a root, a thick one jutting from the bank. I latch on. My body swings with the current, slammed against the trunk. I can't climb. I can't pull up. Water keeps shoving me sideways, dragging me toward the edge of the ravine. A rock tears at my shoulder. My legs scrape against something sharp. I scream, but the water eats it, all of it. Then I feel it. Something shifts beneath me. The base of the tree trembles. If I lose this grip, I'm gone. I hold. I don't know how long. Long enough for the wind to die again. Long enough for the water to slow just enough. When they found me at dawn, I was curled at the base of that same tree, covered in mud and shaking. A rescue crew in yellow vests pulled me up and carried me out without a word. They had to cut their way through the trees to reach the cabin. The front porch was gone. The window frames cracked inward like something had tried to crawl through. Inside, the bedroom floor had collapsed. But what I still see most clearly, what never leaves me, are the footprints. Wet, bare, leading up the wall beneath the window, as if someone had stepped from the flood and climbed upward with no weight at all. Back in the city now, I flinch every time a storm rolls in. My hands tremble without warning. And sometimes, just before sleep, I hear it again. Drip, pause, drip. Always from just beneath the window.